Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
The Lincoln Heights Scott R.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Robertson, and I'm an alcoholic. Are you hearing me okay? Great. I'd like to thank the committee and Lisa for inviting me, and it has really been a lovely conference. I guess without belaboring that, just get straight into a little AA pitch. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, and I began drinking at a very young age. At about age 8, my older brother and a friend of ours named Chris decided that we were going to try some alcohol while my parents were away at work. And so we took out these little plastic glasses and filled them up about a couple inches high with Drambuie. And because it was one of the bottles that looked fairly full, and it's sort of a dark bottle, so you can't see how much is in it. And we filled them up, and I can remember to this day, having that first sip of alcohol, that my natural response was, of course, it's really smelly stuff, and my eyes kind of watered, and it burned in my mouth, and it burned as it went down, and my body just wanted to get rid of it, and I was going to throw up. But, at 8 years old, what I did was, I swallowed it down, and it burned all the way down. And by the time it got to my stomach, I started to have this sort of dizzy feeling in my head. And it was the best feeling I had ever had. It was like sugar times 10. And at 8 years old, it was a great feeling. And my brother and Chris, they had that same response I did, that they drank a little bit of it, and they were talking about, how it made them feel like throwing up and how it burned, and they really didn't enjoy it very much. But my first thought after that warm, fuzzy feeling came over me is I want some more of that. And so I had a second glass of it right then. And, I ran around and played, and I passed out on the front lawn, and I still to this day don't know what my mom thought. Walking, she had to walk past me laying kind of spread eagle on the front lawn at 8, smelling like Drambuie, because you can smell Drambuie from 8 feet away. But, no comment, I guess. No awareness that had gone on. And maybe that had something to do with the fact that, my grandfathers on both sides were alcoholics and never recovered and never really identified as alcoholics. And never went to treatment. There was no intervention. They both died from diseases that are complications of alcoholism, but no one ever spoke anything of that in my family. And that was sort of the note at which my drinking and drug use continued, that there were very, very few consequences on the outside for me of my drinking and using. Now, at age 8, age 9, alcohol is relatively difficult to get. And so anybody who ever is uncomfortable with hearing about drugs and Alcoholics Anonymous need only read the big book, and read Dr. Bob's story, where he talks about he needed huge doses of sedatives to calm his nerves in the morning. So, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we do have a primary purpose to carry the message to another alcoholic who's suffering, but we also have a responsibility to tell the truth. And alcoholism is just one brand name form of addiction. And so for me, what that meant is that nobody, thanks, nobody will sell alcohol to an 8 or a 9-year-old. However, nobody asks for an ID if you buy that green leafy version of alcohol. So by the time I was 11, I was high every day. on the way to school, on my lunch break, and on the way home from school. And what I also recognized, though I was an enterprising young man, I would steal money where I needed to from my family to get that, because the pot created that same feeling that the alcohol did, and that is everything was sort of warm and sort of nice, and things that bothered me didn't seem to bother me so much. I felt 10 degrees happier if I was under the influence of something. And so I became a young businessman, of course. My particular business name was Joints for Jocks, and that is where you sell a joint the size of your finger, filled mostly with neatly toasted oregano and parsley from my mother's spice cabinet, broiled in the oven with my chopped up seeds and stems to flavor it just a little bit, so the uninitiated would pay $5 for one of those. And so that's, the mid-1970s. In fact, I was an enterprising young businessman in 1976 when living sober began. And so that you don't have to fuss with the math too much, I was born in 1962. So that made me 13, 14 when my business was fully underway. But right away, one of the characteristics of our disease is that we sometimes do this thing called substitution, where, when one kind of alcohol is troubling us a little bit, we try another kind of alcohol. And so at that age, alcohol still is really hard to get. So for me, most of my alcohol then was, combinations of whatever I could steal from their liquor cabinet. Some of you will identify with this, and if I had a glass, that you sip alcohol like this, real slowly. And what you'd be doing is you had collected the glasses from your parents' party the night before that, of course, in the 70s, they dropped a cigarette butt in it. And there's some good booze in there because it's got that nice amber color, and you hope that the darker amber at the bottom, that's the tobacco disintegrating, isn't going to get stirred up as you drink it. But, I was that devoted a drinker as a young man, so I really liked my alcohol. But when I couldn't get it, I'd switch to pot. And after a couple of years of smoking pot, I started to have a reputation as a burnout. And that wasn't good because I couldn't get laid as much as school. So, I figured, okay, you got to stop smoking pot. So I switched. And at the end of my freshman year in high school, I took up the full-time pursuit of getting alcohol. Now, in the meantime, one of my main sources for alcohol was my former drug dealer, who worked at a bowling alley. I introduced him to my sister in one of those, tender moments of, family. Not that I exploited anyone ever in the practicing of my disease. Not that there were discounts involved or a case of beer or anything like that. But I treated people kind of badly in order to get my alcohol. And so I drank, and then my drug dealer, of course, had cocaine and had, some speed and some MDA and MMDA and, cross tops and black beauties. And, kind of any drug that was available was interesting for me to try. And so I would do that. And lo and behold, I went to my first AA meeting at a very young age because my sister, who I turned on to pot and other kinds of partying, 2 years older than me, by 1978, she got sent to a treatment program. And so that treatment program required family members to go to an AA meeting, like they were forcing the patients to do. And that was at Rockford Memorial Hospital in the basement. And so I went, because of my sister going to treatment, to this meeting. And the guy who spoke was a Southern gentleman, and he was wearing a plaid polyester sport suit. Or sport coat with really large lapels. And, this is 1978, and that might have been in fashion maybe in 1972, but it was really, really kind of odd looking, and he had a Southern accent, and I was kind of an arrogant kid. I did really well in school, and I was reading the Gulag Archipelago when it was published, and reading my dad's college textbooks because he sort of pushed me intellectually to grow. I had siblings 1 and 2 years older than me, so I was always bored in school. I'd learned the material for the classes I was going to be in, and I was half, blazed all the time at school anyway. So I would know the material, though, and that way no one would ever confront me about using. And, as the case was, I continued to drink. I go to this AA meeting with my sister in treatment, and this guy had this Southern accent, and as arrogant as I was as a young man, anybody who had a Southern accent, I just figured they were stupid. So this guy shared his story, and I thought it was ridiculous because he was making himself vulnerable by telling the truth of what was going on in his life. And you see, for me at that stage, I had like lots of different lives going on. You know, I had the one version for my parents. I had a cleaner, tidier version for my grandparents. I had a really nice version where I was a lay reader in the Episcopal Church. I had a fairly straightforward version at school where, you know, I did the football team and a little student government and that kind of stuff and got good grades. I had a different version for my siblings and their friends. I had a different version for my drug dealer and my party friends. Then I had this other little thing going on the side where I had called the local gay bar. There was only one in Rockford, Illinois, when I was 15 years old, because I'd started having sex with women when I was 12. And, you know, it's really tough to have sex with women when you don't have a place to go, like when you're 12, 13, 14. By the time I was 15, I figured out that I could, you know, probably find a gay man who'd provide certain services for me. So I called the local gay bar, and I told this guy to hand the phone to the nearest person at the bar, which he did. And I told this guy, I'm 15 years old and I'm going out for a run, and I want you to meet me at the corner of Prestwick Parkway and Knollwood in 15 minutes. And so 15 minutes later, this old station wagon pulls up, and this guy, you know, he's nervous, older guy, and he looks at me, and I say, okay, yeah, open up the door, and I say, there's a park 2 blocks up, 2 blocks to the left. And I suddenly figured that I had it all going on. You know, because I could get what I want, you know, sexually from men secretly. I could have the relationship with the girl going on the outside that made it all look good. And I had all these different versions of my life going on in terms of my drug and alcohol use and school and church and so on. So, you know, really what was going on is that this disease, you see, it likes to divide and conquer. You know, our recovery, higher power, is not available when our lives are that compartmentalized. Because the one element that's missing is the truth. And what happened for me is I didn't even know how to keep track of all the lies I had going on. So at that meeting that I went to when I was 16, I didn't get anything out of that. But within a year, you know, what had happened without any intention on my part is it got worse. I mean, I got arrested for drunk driving. I got pulled over when I was 15, a little before then, driving a friend's car, drunk, throwing beer cans out the windows. And, you know, no real consequences. In the 1970s, that first DUI that I had cost me all about $150. You know, I had, you know, insurance, so the damage I did to the other cars didn't matter. You know, and over again, I damaged my sister's car, my parents' car, the business I worked for's car. You know, my own car. I did a hit and run and left, and, you know, my dad took me back to find the car the next day. And, you know, what happened? I put on that responsible young man jive, you know, and walked up with my insurance card in hand and, you know, apologized to the officer, to the people whose car I'd hit. And so he, of course, gave me a stern lecture and drove me home. So, you know, with no consequences going on at all, there wasn't a lot to make it change. But, you know, within a year of going to that first meeting, something that had been said in that meeting must have sunk in. And I started going to meetings for myself. My friend, Bill, my sister's boyfriend by then, he had been sober for a year, and my sister had stayed sober from that treatment program for a year. And Bill asked if I wanted to go to an AA meeting with him. And I thought, well, isn't this sad? You know, poor Bill, he doesn't have any fun anymore, and he goes to these AA meetings, and he can't even go to these AA meetings without my help. So I said, Bill, okay, he and I used to drink a lot together. Let's go out for dinner like we used to, and I'll go to your AA meeting with you. And so he takes me out for dinner, and I have a couple of glasses of scotch, and I went to my first AA meeting for myself. And in Rockford, Illinois, they do things a little differently than we do here in California. They have a first step meeting. And in that meeting, they'd ask, you know, newcomers, and we raise our hands. And last night, I was really, you know, moved that there were about 15 people, I think, close to a dozen at least, you know, who are here under 30 days. And what they do is anyone under 30 days, they'd offer to give them a first step meeting. And what that means is a couple of people from the bigger room would offer to go off into another room and tell their story, hopefully in the format that I'm telling you right now. You know, that is to tell them what it used to be like when they were drinking and using, what happened to make them change, and what their life has been like in recovery. So about a half a dozen people took me off to a room, and they shared their stories with me. And, you know, all I could notice was what was different between me and them. They were older than I was. There were women. They were less educated than my family was or that I thought I was. I just noticed the differences in us. And at the end of the meeting, they asked the newcomer to come back into the larger room, and they asked me to, if I wanted to share anything. And like a polite young man, I said, oh, of course I would. And so I thanked them for their tales of debauchery and disgust, and that because they had slunk so low and, really scraped the bottom from their alcoholism, I wouldn't have to go that far, or so I thought, And so I didn't stay sober then, but what happened is I took about actually trying to recover a little bit. And there's nothing worse than a head full of AA and a belly full of booze. And I just couldn't really stop drinking because what happened and what was going on was that everything that I did after 11 o'clock at night was a secret. And so I'd come into these rooms and I'd do steps 1, 2, and 3, like any of us can to put down the drink or the drug. And when it came to step 4, when it came to a searching and fearless moral inventory, I couldn't tell anyone what was going on in my sex life. I was just too ashamed. The only thing I knew about gay men was what I'd read and in the police blotters in the newspaper. And so there was no staying sober for me. I'd come in and people would share their story, and it seemed foolish to me because they'd make themselves vulnerable by telling me what was going on in their life. And where I come from, when someone tells you the truth about their life, it's something that you use to blackmail them or to manipulate them with. And I didn't get, like what honesty and open-mindedness and willingness were about. So, I continued to come in and out. I'd one point got 13 months clean and sober, and at another point, 18 months clean and sober. And after that period of time, I had caused a couple of pregnancies, one that resulted in a son, a couple others that resulted in abortions. And, really hurting the people that were close to me in my life. And I figured during one of those periods of time, my first year of sobriety, I was away at college, and I'd spent my money on taking care of these abortions and trying to be there for these women that I had been unkind to say the least. And I couldn't tell my family. That I spent this money from my summer job. It was my part of my responsibility for school. I couldn't tell them the truth about all of that. And so I figured I'd drop out of college so that they wouldn't give me such a bad time about money for school, and I joined the Army. So I joined the Army. I got stationed at Fort Ord. I got an enlistment bonus. Got a new car and stayed sober through basic training in AIT. And shortly after I got to Fort Ord, I discovered that there was an adult bookstore in Seaside. And there I could meet all of the nameless, faceless, men that I wanted to meet. And, one night, one of them, who, made me feel particularly good, offered to buy me a drink afterwards. And so of course, free booze. I wasn't going to pass that up.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And then he gave me his phone number, and I thought that was kind of weird because, I don't really have any need to call, or know the name or anything like that. But he said that we could go out and he would buy me some beers at a restaurant in Monterey. And so I figured, well, if that makes this gay guy happy, he can do what he did for me before, and if he buys me some beers, it'll be good. So I called him, and I started seeing him regularly. And he'd buy me all kinds of booze, and he'd do those things that made me feel good, and that was all kind of convenient. And then he asked me to stay over at his house with his family. And this is a Filipino family, and there were 9 people living there. And so he had his own bedroom, though, and he had a twin-size bed. And but I figured, if there's booze involved, I can leave post every night and go sleep there and, get all the free booze and all the free sex that I wanted and, go back and tell them at the Army about, I'm at my girlfriend's house overnight. And so that's what I was doing. Come, my 24th birthday, I've been relapsing by then for about 2 years. I was supposed to get an Army Achievement Award and a battalion award ceremony that day, and it got delayed. And so me and my buddies in the barracks started drinking. And the other thing that I was doing when I was in the Army is since they test for pot and cocaine and sedatives and speed, the only thing that was left that I could use was LSD, of course. You know, because Monterey is close by Santa Cruz. And so, of course, you know, Santa Cruz, there's lots of paper available there. And so I used to do road marches on acid, you know, like 26-mile road marches where you put a couple tabs in the leather liner of the helmet and it just sort of seeps in over the course of your hike. And lovely, lovely experiences. And, you know, the fact is that LSD never really leaves your body. So if I behave sort of strangely sometimes, that's probably all it is. So don't be alarmed. But 24th birthday, the award ceremony's not happening. And days going on, and I'm drinking and drinking and drinking, and the award ceremony doesn't happen. And I'm really disappointed. The world, you know, the banks are still open. There's no parades for my 24th birthday. You know, not that I was self-centered at all. And, you know, I go home to Jose's house, and his dad gives me a couple glasses of scotch. And Jose says, why don't I take you out to the bar? You know, there's one bar in Monterey, the After Dark. I think it's still there, Pacific Grove. And so he convinced, now I don't like to go to this gay bar because there's gay guys there, right? And you know, I don't like gay guys. So he takes me there, and he's buying me drinks. And all these other guys at the bar become aware that this bizarre young couple, you know, this 24-year-old, you know, kid in the Army, and his 22-year-old, you know, Filipino boyfriend. And I wouldn't dance with him, for instance, you know, because guys don't dance with guys, according to how I grew up. And so what I'd do is I'd stand at the side of the bar with, you know, the drink that he'd buy me, and he'd dance for me. You know, he'd like perform for me. So it was quite a spectacle in this bar. And people became aware it was my birthday, so they're buying me drinks. And an older guy offers me a bottle of old scotch in his jacuzzi in Carmel, and I think that sounds sweet. And so I go to leave with him, of course, right? And Jose's friends and Jose try to stop me, you know, from leaving with this guy. And I'm not getting why, you know. I mean, it's a sweet deal. Wouldn't you go? And so I deck them and I deck Jose. And here's what drinking does to me. You know, Jose had treated me really sweetly. And so what was I doing? I was beating his head against a cement wall across the street from the After Dark. The police came. And, you know, I'm standing there in handcuffs on the sidewalk, and this policewoman is asking Jose about me, and she turns to me and she says, don't you think it's time you did something about your drinking problem? And, you know, right there and then I told her basically what I just told you. You know, that I'd been around the program for 8 years at that point, and when it came to telling the truth about what happens after 11 o'clock at night, I couldn't do it. And she made me a deal. This was November 26, 1986. She said, if you go to an AA meeting tomorrow, I'll send you and your lover home in a cab. And, you know, I agreed to do that. And that was, the next day was Thanksgiving Day, and I haven't had to get drunk since then. And the fact is that I've been sober for those years, and so much has happened and changed in my life. You know, I'd like to keep it all even thirds, you know, what it used to be, what happened, and what it's like now. And the what happened takes a while, because that was 8 years of in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what it's been like in the years since then has just been miraculous. You know, when I had 9 months or 6 months clean and sober, this time I started doing the steps ferociously with a sponsor. And by the time I had 6 months, I had saved this money in the Army College Fund to, you know, to pay for school. And the fact is, if you took your contribution out, the Army would no longer provide the matching fund. And it was time for me to do my 9th step, and I had stolen money from my father while I was in college by writing a check at the bookstore and returning the goods the next day so that I have booze for the weekend. And, you know, then tell them that I had to write this check, and they'd put money in my checking account and so on. And when it came to that step, you know, some of my friends in meetings in Monterey said, you know, well, Scott, don't take your money out of the Army College Fund. Don't cut off your nose to spite your face, you know, and disqualify yourself from money for school. And my sponsor took the other side, as sometimes is a good thing with sponsors. And he said, you know, Scott, the step is not really that confusing. It says we made direct amends, you know, except, you know, when to do so would injure them or others. And you are not an other. And, you know, some of my enabling friends thought, oh, you know, you're going to hurt yourself. But my sponsor said, no, you need to take care of this. And so I did. And I flew back in June of that year back to Illinois, and I paid him back about $2,000 that I'd stolen from him. And he and I were good, kind of man to man. In August that year, just a couple months later, he got in a terrible automobile accident and a severe head injury, and went into a rehab program after some brain surgery and so on. And it looked like he was going to recover, and I'd used all my leave time to go be like a sober adult son as my father, went through this accident in the beginning of his recovery. September 9th, I'm calling around trying to reach my mother because it's her birthday. And I'm really feeling this because, before I would never have bothered to call anyone for their birthday. I couldn't get, I don't know about your alcoholism, but my alcoholism and addiction are so profound that the thought of getting outside of myself to wish somebody else a happy birthday was just not on the playing field. But, Alcoholics Anonymous had taught me to suit up and show up and do the right behavior. My sponsor was not concerned at all with my feelings. What he was concerned with is my behavior, that I take the right actions. And so I took the right actions to call my mother that day. And, I called her house and there was no answer. I called the hospital. She had just left. And I asked the nurse if my dad was still awake, and he was. And I asked if I could talk to him. So she took the phone in there to his room in this rehab program, and I asked him how he was doing. And we had a little news, weather, and sports conversation about my trip back to California. And he said, "I love you, buddy. Good night." And I said, "I love you too, Dad. Good night." And I hung up the phone, and I went into my room at Jose's, and just started crying, fetal position on the bed, realizing that my parents' life was devastated. My mom was going to be spending the rest of her life doing custodial care with my dad. And my dad, who had 2 master's degrees, was having to learn how to read again. And just really was profoundly affected by what was happening in their life. Really grateful, too, that I had made these amends, that I'd set myself straight with him before this terrible accident took place. And about 10 minutes later, Jose comes and gets me, and my mom was on the phone, and she told me, Scott, your dad's died. And what I got is, like doing the steps, taking the proper action, doing the right behavior, not about my feelings or my fears, but about doing the right behavior, that I'd be in the right place at the right time for miracles to take place. And, the miracle I got right then was a perfectly good closure with my dad, who'd been really violent with me. We'd had very difficult times as I was growing up. And we got a closure that allowed me then to look at my issues as a man. And I went into therapy. I've needed a lot of outside help. And, I got to sift through all of that macho bullshit that I grew up with, and the violence and the being abused, physically abused and sexually abused and intellectually abused as a kid. And I got to sift through that and be okay with myself today. And, what's happened in the years since then is I have continually had a sponsor. My sponsor right now is a guy named Bud Coffey, who lives in Los Angeles, who has 10 years more time than I do. I've got a herd of people that I sponsor. And, what that provides for me is it keeps me freshly aware of my disease, freshly aware of my limitations. And, in many ways, I skated through my sobriety doing all the things that are suggested for a number of years, since 24. And, my life seemed really, really just gilded. I had that relationship with Jose lasted 5 years, and then another relationship that lasted 5 years, then another relationship that lasted 5 years. And then I grew and changed, and the next relationship lasted 6.5 years. And what happened, though, is I started, doing behaviors that were really pretty dangerous and self-destructive to me. Still cocky and arrogant and overconfident and kind of adolescent in many ways. Because, my disease interrupted my growing up profoundly. And I didn't learn how to be an adult, as an adolescent or as a young adult. I've only learned that in Alcoholics Anonymous, and sometimes I have to learn things the hard way. So what happened is that I got to a place about 6 years ago where suddenly my husband at the time, or partner at the time, got hospitalized. We thought we'd been HIV negative all this time. He was hospitalized with PCP. And suddenly I found out I was HIV positive. And I started getting behind on my mortgage payments. And the administrator of my retirement fund was a company called AIG. You might remember them. And so I was thinking I'd take money out of my retirement fund, correct my arrears. Well, that wasn't going to happen so quickly. And then my sponsor got liver cancer. And my Eskimo, Bill, who I mentioned earlier, he got brain cancer. And then they put me on HIV meds, and the HIV meds didn't work so well. My liver and kidneys weren't responding well. They were inflamed. Damage from, my short drinking career was just as devastating as anyone's drinking career in the room. And, what happened, of course, is my Eskimo died, my sponsor died, the foreclosure took place, my depression set in, my husband left, and, what I did is what we do in these rooms. When my ass falls off, I put it in a little paper sack and carry it back with me to the meeting. And I say it out loud as soon as I can, what's been happening. And I got to do a little bit of inventory once again, and to find out that I had put that stuff in motion. I made the choice to get in a relationship with a guy who's almost 20 years younger than I was. I made the choice to have, unsafe sex with him. There was a time when all this took place, when I was his victim, when he had caused all this devastation to come about for me. And, the fact is that doing my inventory, I found out that I put all that stuff in motion. And, the fact is that all kinds of great things have happened in my life. I've worked in a professional job that I've been at the same hospital for 22 years, and I've got about 10 co-author and author credits in peer-reviewed journals. Last year, the department that I worked for got a National Quality Award in healthcare for 10 years of an outcome study that we've had in place in addiction treatment. I have this marvelous work where I've been for many, many years with beautiful people, one of them here today. The fact is that as an alcoholic, I have a basic inability to form meaningful relationships with other human beings, most importantly, intimate relationships. But the gift here is if we keep doing our own inventory, if we keep looking at what we've created in our own lives, we can recreate all of that. And the fact is, my partner, my fiance, is sitting in the front row right now, and we plan on getting married in about 14 months. And all of those things, that were negative have turned around. The losses I've experienced, about 40 friends from AIDS, my father, a 10-year-old niece, a couple of my previous boyfriends, a bunch of sponsees, all of those deaths that I've experienced, all of those losses, Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me how to be there for people. Not to fake it, not to pretend. Taught me to have relationships with other human beings where I make myself vulnerable. The reason I've had all those relationships is after the relationship ends and fails, I look at what's on my side of the street, I do my very best to clean it up, and I make myself vulnerable all over again. And I'm really, really grateful for that. I have a beautiful life today, and it really is only the result of doing the simple things that are suggested in these rooms and trying to keep my ego out of the way. And I have to just remember on a day-at-a-time basis that my spiritual program is really indicated not by my feelings. You can look at my spiritual program rather by my actions. My feelings are God-given and important, but they're all going to pass. And then what I do with those feelings and how I interact with the rest of the world is the measure of my recovery. And then as a result, creates this great happiness that I have today. So I want to thank you all for giving me a marvelous life. And, really so happy to remember that my feelings today matter a little bit and my behavior today matters a whole lot. So thanks for letting me share today.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.